Chapter 27, Jesus' Papa Joseph passes away, and Jesus strong and helpful in all areas. Chapter 27. It was a quiet morning as we threw our nets into the deep, dark water. The only sounds you could hear were the other fishermen in their boats casting their nets out as well. The morning went on, the waves became unusually high and choppy, and the boat was tossed around a lot while we were trying to pull in our nets. The boat was pitching back and forth, side to side, making it extra hard to pull in the nets. We noticed the other fishermen were having the same trouble. Once we got the nets back on board, we were thankful to see that they were filled with many types of fish. Everyone liked different kinds of fish, of course. This would be a good day at the market. When we got back to the shore, we folded our nets and tied off the boat. The waves were still pretty rough, and we tied a few more ropes onto the trees to be sure the boat wouldn't get loose and float away. As we walked toward the market, we passed Mary and Joseph's house. There seemed to be some commotion going on inside, so we tried to mind our own business and keep walking. Jude ran outside when he saw us walking by and yelled for us to come in. Mary was standing near Joseph, who was lying on the bed. The children were all crying, and Mary was holding Joseph's hand. Apparently, Joseph had died through the night. Joseph was a little younger than my papa. Leah and Abby were kneeling beside Joseph's bed, while Jesus and James were standing on either side of Mary, giving her support. Joseph, Simon, and Jude were standing against the wall. They were all weeping and crying. I went to Mary, who fell into my arms crying, and the two sisters hugged Mary around her waist. Papa told the three boys to go with him to the temple to get the priest. In the sad time, such as now, we need our priest to be by our side and speak words of comfort to us, to our hearts, as our hearts are breaking in the loss of a loved one. Mary and her children would need them, as well as friends and family, to help them to help them grieve as the loss of Joseph. Even though Jesus was being strong for Mary, he was also sad and crying. He was still human and adored Joseph as his earthly father. Jesus and James went to the carpentry shop to quickly build a coffin in which to place Joseph. Jesus, now 25, had made many coffins for people in our town whom had passed away. They made the coffin from cedar, a sweet-smelling wood with a reddish color. It was made with no nails or hinges in the lid, closed down, and was a perfect fit. Meanwhile, Mary and Leah put sweet-smelling oil and spices on Joseph and wrapped him in white cloths. There were people dressed in black outside Mary's house to show their sadness of Joseph dying. No one wears bright colors during this time. In fact, the family members will wear a black strip of fabric around their left arm to show people that a loved one has died. Joseph was buried a day later, as is our custom. At the funeral, we walked by Joseph's coffin to throw a handful of dirt on it. Then we walked to the road to line up on either side. Amos and Cody were behaving very well. I was so proud of them. Once everyone was in place, some men picked up the coffin and walked through the lines of friends along with Mary and her children. Joseph's burial place was in a cave outside of town. Jesus took Mary's arm and walked back to their house with the other children. Some women in the town had come to Mary's home with lots of food for the family. The food was brought in because while the family is sad and grieving, they sometimes forget to eat and certainly do not want to cook. It is also good to have food there for visitors who come to see them. Mama and Deborah were so helpful during these first few days after Joseph passed. They made sure there was plenty of food in Mary's house so that the children would have something to eat. They greeted visitors who came to see Mary and her children. Jesus seemed to be constantly have children around him to tell them stories and keep them occupied. On the seventh day, there was a ceremony at the synagogue where some of us stood up and said some nice things about Joseph and how special he was to us. Mary and the children would have a great deal of adjustment in having Joseph gone from their home. Fortunately, Joseph had trained Jesus and James very well in the skill of carpentry, and the boys would be able to carry on the business at the carpentry shop. Jesus and James were young men, but they were mature and serious, and they took their craft very seriously and produced fine work. Also being trained was Joseph and Simon, so the carpentry shop would certainly thrive and go on for many years. After a few days of looking after Mary and her children, we men went back out to the boat. The rocking of the boat in the water is very relaxing and makes me think deeply about things. Papa and Andrew were deep in thought as well. We talked about how Papa needed to take it a little easier and rest at home with Mama more often.